Negative emotions. Taking a look now at what work on oneself means with regard to negative emotions, the work says, you have a right not to be negative. Notice that the work does not say, you have no right to be negative. One of the signs whereby we can distinguish between a false and a true teaching is that a false teaching insists upon or makes a rule about our doing something that we cannot do. It is the sign of a false teaching to make us promise something, or swear to it, take an oath of silence or celibacy and so on. An ordinary person cannot keep a promise under all circumstances, because they are not one person, but many. Someone writes the checks, then someone else has to honor them. One person, one I in us may promise sincerely, even binds itself by oath, but other eyes in us will know nothing about this. To assume therefore that an individual can promise anything, is to assume that they are already one, a unity, a person having only one real and permanent I, controlling them, therefore only one will. But most have many eyes, and as many different wills. Suppose then that the work made a rule to this effect, you must not be negative. You must swear never to be negative. If you break this promise, you must leave the work. If the work said that, it would mean that it took for granted that one can do. But the work says that man such as he is, cannot do, and that this is one of the things we have to become aware of through self-observation. If we still imagine that we can do, if we think that we can always remember, can keep our aim and direct our will, then we can make no room for the work in ourselves, and this work will not be able to help us, because we will not feel our inner helplessness. If we begin to feel our inner helplessness in the right way, then we will feel the need of the work and what it offers. How can the work help us? It can help only if we begin to obey it. To feel the need of the work is to feel that we need something to guide us. If we are going to let something guide us, then we must obey it. We must try to follow the work. Of course, if we understand nothing, we cannot obey the work. So we have to think about what it is that the work teaches, and fix that clearly in our mind. We have to think alone, in our most private and real thoughts, what this work is saying to us all the time. If we have thought in this deeper, intimate and private way, we should see that the work tells us more about what not to do, than about what to do. People then often ask, what am I to do? On that side the work says only two definite things, remember yourself, and observe or notice yourself. That is what we must try to do. But on the other side the work says many things about what we must not do. It says, for example, that we must try to struggle against being identified, try to struggle with mechanicalness, with mechanical and wrong talking, with every kind of internal considering, with every kind of self-justifying, with all the different pictures of ourselves, with our special forms of imagination, with mechanical disliking, with all varieties of self-pity and self-esteem, with our jealousy, with hatred, with our vanity, our inner falseness, with lying, with self-conceit, with our attitudes, prejudices and so on. Then it expressly speaks of struggling with our negative emotions taken as a whole. Sometimes we meet a person in the work who is very eager and wishes to know exactly what to do. It is particularly people who only have external attention, and no internal attention that ask this. As noted, this work begins with internal attention. Self-observation is internal attention. A person must begin to see for themselves what they are like and what goes on in them. For example, they must begin to see through internal attention, their own negative emotions instead of only seeing other people's with external attention. They must see what it means to identify with negative emotions, and what it means not to identify with them. Once they observe this, they have a key to the work on the practical side in hand. For this reason, the first stages of the work are sometimes called cleaning the machine. A person who constantly says, "What should I do?" after hearing the practical teaching of this work over and over again, is like one who has a garden full of weeds and says eagerly, "What should I plant in it? What should I grow next?" They must first clean the garden. So the work lays great emphasis on what not to do, on what must be stopped, what must no longer be indulged in, what is to be prevented, what is no longer to be nourished, and what must be cleaned away from the human machine. For none of us have nice new machines when we enter the work, but rusty, dirty machines that need a daily and indeed a lifelong cleaning in order to maintain them. One of the greatest forms of dirt is negative emotions and habitual indulgence in them. The greatest filth in us is negative emotion. An habitually negative person is a filthy person in the work sense. A person who is always thinking unpleasant things about others, saying unpleasant things, disliking everyone, being jealous, always having some grievance or some form of self-pity, always feeling that he or she is not rightly treated, and so on. Such a person has a filthy mind in the most real and practical sense, because all these things are forms of negative emotion, and all negative emotions are dirt. The work says that we have a right not to be negative. As was pointed out, it does not say that we have no right to be negative. If we think of the difference, we should see how great it is. To feel that one has a right not to be negative means that we are well on our way to real inner work on ourselves with regard to negative states. To be able to feel this draws down force to help us to stand upright, as it were, in ourselves, among all the mess of our negativity, to feel and know that it is not necessary to lie down in that mess. To say this phrase in the right way to ourselves and deeply feel the meaning of the words, I have a right not to be negative, is actually a form of self-remembering, of feeling a trace of real I, that lifts us up above the level of our negative eyes, which are all the time telling us incessantly that we have every right to be negative. Levels have been discussed previously, however some may not understand what a higher level means in a practical sense. What is a lower and what is a higher level in ourselves? This work is to make us live on a higher level of ourselves. For example, suppose that we begin to internally consider. We start making accounts, making out that others owe us, that we're entitled, thinking that we are badly treated, worrying about what others think of us, and that we deserve better. This is the activity of a lower level of ourselves. We cannot live on a more preferable leave if we are going to indulge all the time in internal considering. Suppose that we begin to dislike that inner taste of considering. Then when internal considering starts in us, we notice it and feel uncomfortable. Why? Because we have already begun to feel what a higher level of the self is like. We feel uncomfortable by reason of the contrast. We have seen and know something better. We are now in a position to make an inner choice. Or again, if we are in a negative state, are we on a lower or higher level of ourselves? We are on a lower level and will not be able to taste what a higher level is like as long as we self-indulge, unchecked in our negative states. It is always a question of inner decision, of inner choice. If we begin to be interested in our better states, and study what makes them distasteful, we begin to work practically on ourselves. Better states belong to higher levels of being. They are in us, but as different levels. We can live in the basement, or higher up. But one has to see all this for themselves and get to know where they are in themselves. Ask internally, where am I? With what thoughts and emotions am I going? With what moods? With what eyes? One has to learn not only with whom to live inside oneself, but where to live as well. One last thing to note in dealing with negative states, look at the I in you and not at the person with whom you are negative. The real cause of the negative state is the I that is speaking in us and to which we are listening. If we let this I go on talking and listen to it, then we will become more and more negative. Its only object is to make us negative and to absorb as much of our life force as it can. Every negative I has only one purpose, to get hold of us and then feed upon that negative energy. It grows and is strengthened at our expense. It's nothing personal, it is struggling for its existence too, just as we are. The real cause of negative states lies in ourselves, in negative eyes that live only to persuade us with their half-truths and lies, to rule over us and to spoil our lives. All negative eyes only wish to subjugate us, and bring things down to their level, as this is vital to their very existence. This is a useful exercise to practice.